Information and Technology, Meeting 6, agenda. We are, for discussion only, we've got a very good presentation. Also, ladies, the only thing I'll remind you, the only thing stand between these legislators and lunch. So, but look forward. Please announce yourself for the record, and love to hear what you, Sasha, please call the roll. Sorry.
Representative Dotson. Representative Pfister.
Here.
Representative Freeland. Representative Grossberg.
Present.
Representative Heath.
Here.
Representative King.
Present.
Representative Kulkarni.
Present.
Representative Maddox. Representative Roberts. Representative Stalker.
Present.
Representative Tate. Representative White. Representative Witten. Here. Representative Lawrence. Chairman Pratt.
Present. Well, would you please introduce yourself for the record? Again, I met these ladies about a month and a half ago. I think what they're doing is amazing work, and this is a great forum to actually let the public know, but also us know what all you're all doing. So please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you so much. And by the way, this meeting is standing between my lunch and now as well, so thank you. My name's Corinne Goebel. I'm the CEO of the Association of Women's Business Centers.
Thank you so much for having us. My name is Devaney King, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Business Center of Kentucky.
So what I'll walk us through just a little bit of broad understanding of what women's business centers are, assuming you've never heard of one. It is a federally funded program, and most people have not heard of it. And we'll drill down then into some activity that's happening here in Kentucky and potentially some opportunities that could be explored for the future. So the Association of Women's Business Centers is a 501c3 nonprofit that exists to ignite the entrepreneurial spirit of women by supporting a national network of women's business centers and by inspiring hope to women directly. And for us, HOPE stands for helping others by promoting entrepreneurship. So again, what is a women's business center? Well, it's an partially SBA-funded program or organization that provides free or low-cost business coaching, training, connections to people, and other resources, including capital. And we measure our success on very specific metrics to include launching new businesses as well as capital transaction infusions. And so the picture there is actually one of the clients that are represented here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Where are women's business centers found? Well, frankly speaking, you could be walking past a women's business center, even the one here in Kentucky, every day and never even know it's there. These programs are embedded inside our community organizations, sometimes universities, sometimes economic or community development organizations, and I've listed a couple of them here, and I'm assuming you would recognize the organization that is a housing CDFI in Lexington a moment, but you can just get a picture where, especially in our rural areas across the country, quite a bit of opportunity potentially to provide more service. Who do we serve? Well, the name would imply women, but in matter of fact, we serve anyone that walks through the door, individuals across those 145 women's business centers. I say estimate because we believe that not all of the data is being collected at SBA, and we're working to help them address some of those technology gaps in the collection, but it could actually be much more than 120,000 unique businesses. Across the country, we launched at least 3,300 new businesses and deployed a record $1 billion in capital. This is actually representative of a business here in Kentucky as well. Got this before I had the chance to meet Devaney, actually doing a roundtable here, learning about what are the barriers to the women-owned businesses here in Kentucky. We actually have set up an Association of Women's Business Center office in Louisville, so that puts me in great proximity to some of your clients. And this woman here, she actually owns a bakery business and was explaining how even though it's not legal, the bankers who she had approached, at least one of them was requiring suggesting that her husband should sign on the loan application. And it took several lenders turning her down before she finally qualified and and was able to succeed in accessing capital. Many of her choices, however, included interest rates, and this was before COVID, over 18%. So very kind of predatory rates in terms, but she was able to find something suitable for her business and was doing great last we checked in with her. We know that the pandemic during COVID also highlighted all of the challenges even further that women businesses are facing. We had a lot of women exit the workforce, open new businesses, as well as shutter businesses during the COVID era. And women's business centers ended up being a really pivotal resource. We saw the demand across the country on women's business centers increase by 10x in some cases. And so that put a lot of access to these services really out of reach, because if you had to wait 6 weeks or 8 weeks to get support, did you really need it anymore? I mean, by that time you were having to move on, make a decision, or even close your business. And so what we learned during the pandemic is the demand, when it surged and when the demand is great, the women's business centers, frankly, just didn't have the resources to expand to meet that demand. This is just a menu of the types of products and services that are offered across various women's business centers. As I mentioned, they all offer training, they all offer one-on-one counseling and additional resources, but the variety of the types of programs can be very different, and in many times are responsive to a local area. Rural areas might see different types of programming than, urban dense areas. And in fact, different community spaces tend to gravitate toward different sectors. For example, in San Francisco, we have a huge food truck sector, really strong there for businesses going into food trucks. And in Brooklyn, New York, major beauty industry, lipstick production, manufacturing. And so it really, it's interesting to see how different each women's business center is. And I'll often say, if you've met one women's business center, you've just only met one, because they are so different. Turn it over to you.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to talk about what we're doing in Kentucky and what we've accomplished over the past 4 years. So without going into detail on each of these lines, you can see we really emphasize on how many clients we help, how many businesses we help get registered at a local, state, and federal level, and then also how we can help them access capital. That could be looking for a bank loan, that could be looking for available grants, and it could also be how to position their own owner's equity to the best of their ability. You'll see in 2024, we've already helped 128 clients start, and out of those start 20 businesses, and a little less than $200,000 in loans that they've approached this year. And we're on track to get 1,000 registered attendees for our events that we host across the state. So the Women's Business Center of Kentucky, we are headquartered in Lexington at Community Ventures, but we do cover all 120 counties of Kentucky. Thanks to technology such as Zoom and other ways and platforms that we can connect with people online and help them address their business needs. And so that could be through one-on-one advising, so helping people get capital ready, lender ready as we like to call it, registering their business, or helping them strategize a business plan. Outside of that, we want to help as many people as possible. So we do have quite a bit of training programs. This could be online or in person. Some of those examples would be our Strong Business, Strong Coffee, or our Strong Women, Strong Coffee events. It's a free event to the public. Initially started in Louisville, pre-pandemic. Happy to announce we're in 7 different cities across Kentucky, in rural areas from east to west, north to south. And that's something we bring a subject matter expert to come in and talk about a business relevant topic to help progress their business. Alongside that, we also have a business expo where men and women are welcome to come for a full day workshop, training, and listen to other entrepreneurs' journeys, and just learn and access information on how they can better utilize existing resources and information to advance their business. Here's another example of a client that we supported out of Woodford County. But I really want to emphasize that last line there is she's encouraging women, no matter what stage of business you're in, to connect with us, because we do help any entrepreneur at any stage of their business with whatever question they may have.
So one of the reasons we wanted to be here with you today is just to share a little bit about the work that we're doing because we know that it can be beneficial to so many more entrepreneurs. I've had the pleasure of speaking to quite a few now state legislatures, as well as U.S. Congress, just about how partnership can, with these government agencies and with state governments, can help increase our reach and increase the impact. Ultimately, every dollar we're investing in women's business centers, we're investing in entrepreneurship, and that has a direct impact on the economy. Really, it's not a feminist issue, right? It's an economic imperative. When we get greater participation and return on investment, we grow this entrepreneurship and we grow our GDP. We grow the Commonwealth of Kentucky and we grow the United States and we become a global competitor. And in fact, I just returned from Panama, the country, last night. I landed at 12:30 a.m. and had the benefit of talking to a variety of small businesses, U.S.-based, who are looking to export and grow their revenue by building trade routes to Panama. And we can do more of that across the Commonwealth as well if we can expand our impact and expand our reach. But we have some funding limitations. And so that's what this slide is really kind of telling that story. The Small Business Act, which authorized women's business centers in 1988, capped the funding because it was a pilot program at the time at $150,000 of federal funds per women's business center, with a requirement that that center would go out and raise the dollars to match. And this makes it somewhat unique across the SBA resource partners. Again, it was designed as a pilot. For example, small business development centers really kind of have the match baked in because when those funds are appropriated to the states and disseminated through the university system, the university takes on the role with those state dollars of matching those federal requirements. Veteran business outreach centers don't have a match. The APEX centers, which accelerate government contracting funded by DoD, don't have a match. And so just a little bit of a different kind of a beast that we are with some burdens on the funding, and then we're capped at that $150,000. We've been advocating and educating Congress about the limitations of the cap, and both in the House and the Senate, they recognize the need, and we've introduced a bill in both chambers, but never just passed one in the same congressional cycle. So haven't made that bill a law, but hopefully we'll be in the process eventually. The budget for a center can obviously exceed the federal funds, and when we partner with states, we can tap into other resources. Sometimes what we see across the women's business centers is partnering with states is more than just a check that the state's writing. It's about partnership for impact and accountability. And now we can talk about how are we really extending SSBCI funds? How are we leveraging capital? What impact are we having as a community and in our state, both for workforce development, job creation, and also obviously the growth of the revenue of the businesses, as well as kind of turning some informal businesses who haven't been filing into actually tax-paying and revenue-generating entities. Great. So we just have the one women's business center location. Devaney's doing everything she can with the resources she can to service the entire state, but with more resources, she and we could do more. And so AWBC, in partnership with women's business centers, have been working together in order to find ways to expand that capacity, just to be able to reach into more communities and have a bigger impact. And so I've just laid out what does that mean, more budget or more resources? So for example, what could we do if the Women's Business Center program had $750,000? And this is just an example for illustration. So we could use a portion of the funds to match the federal SBA funds for the Lexington Center. We could establish operations in, say, Louisville, perhaps in rural areas of eastern and western Kentucky, generate some activity, and then as soon as the SBA federal opportunities open up, now we can leverage those federal dollars and bring in $150,000 per service location or per market where we would intend to expand. So just some ideas about how that could work. Yeah, so that was anything else you wanted to add, Devaney?
No, thank you.
That was it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, you had a great presentation. We have some questions. Representative King?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here today. I have 3 questions, if I may. I was just wondering, yes, one at a time, duly noted, being the Association of Women's Business Centers, but I noticed early on in your presentation you mentioned male or female qualify. Can you help me square why we're called women's business centers
Yeah.
if you don't have to be a woman?
Yeah, sure. Well, it was actually dating back to President Jimmy Carter, who said, we have problems with women businesses getting access to capital. So in the area of finance, those laws were changed to remove the requirements of men to sign on borrowing. And then women's business centers as a pilot were formed. But any program that receives federal funds cannot discriminate, cannot refuse on the basis of gender. And so by virtue of that, we've embraced that, and we've seen 70% of our client base across the country serving women, 30% being men. And to be quite frank with you, having men in our program and in our networks is actually very beneficial. To have a complete and a comprehensive business network, you've got to have men as part of that. And so leveraging, a more inclusive kind of community within the Women's Business Center has really been helpful, to all clients.
Second question, if I may. The success rate on the loans, I saw a couple of slides talking about how many loans are out and the of those loans, but if you can't be refused, is that what you said, or the qualifications are less, you're more likely to be approved? What is the success rate on those loans being repaid or that business being successful?
I can't actually speak. I don't have the numbers on a success rate across women's business centers. I'm not sure if you do in yours.
So that's something we don't track in terms of the success rate. But what I do say is once they get that loan, the services with us don't stop. So we're still a consultant that works with them every step of the way. So for example, if somebody's looking to get a loan to expand to a second location, they're not done working with us. They still work with us, whether it's a quarterly, semi-annual basis to look through cash flow statements, make sure they're tracking with their margins, other ways to make sure that they're adhering to that.
And if I could just add one thing, I'd like to share some information with you after. I actually brought the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission report from 2023. And
Sounds like good bedtime reading.
It kind of is, but there's some great data in here on venture capital return and how the return in women businesses has been greater than other sectors. So,
okay, I'm just wondering if I think we need to be able to track that success rate to make sure that we're appropriately and responsibly distributing those taxpayer dollars to initiate a loan to make sure it doesn't go defunct and those dollars aren't wasted.
Is your question then the success of application to approval or the success of repayment?
Repayment.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that's a really valid performance number. Now, we'll have to go to the lenders to track that, and we can certainly get that from SBA.
Very good, which leads right in. Great segue to my third question is lender protection. So we convince a lender to participate in one of these loans that we don't have a success rate for. Why would they do that? And what kind of protections are in place so they don't lose out on the investment of taking on that loan?
I'm happy to walk through that process.
Okay.
So for us, we don't have preferential towards any lender. So let's say a business comes to us, they have an idea to start a business, they're seeking startup financing. We're going to work through them with a business plan, financial projections, and then we're going to start looking for lenders that are the best match for them. It's ultimately up to the client. I say you're choosing the lender just as much as they're choosing you. So we're a little hands-off with the process because that comes down to the business owner to select who they want to work with. We just provide the information and resources for them to have that in front of them.
I could just, if I could enhance with an anecdote, the Columbia, Missouri Women's Business Center. I'm intimately familiar with them, where they built up a partnership because in rural Missouri there were no banks to provide those loans. They worked with a community bank and devised a relationship where any referrals from the Women's Business Center were lent out of a special pool of dollars. And actually the repayment rate on those dollars exceeded any of their other commercial portfolios just because of the relationship and the trust that had been developed with the Women's Business Center.
Very good. Well, I would be interested in tracking, and I think they're related, the success rate of the loans and what kind of lender protection, which I think they're really tied. If there isn't a good success rate, then our lenders are being put in a bad
Exposed.
position. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. We have Representative Grossberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at that map, would you mind pulling the slide back up of the locations that you have across the country? So I heard you, so that actually does answer my question. You're wanting to expand Lexington, that's great. Add Louisville, Eastern and Western Kentucky. I don't see anything in Northern Kentucky, which is economically as large as Louisville and Lexington combined, arguably because you don't have a Cincinnati center. Would that be through a different region? Would we be responsible for that? I mean, I don't want to take away from Louisville. That's my top priority. But if you put one in Cincinnati, that would cover Northern Kentucky. But in the absence of that, I just think there's a glaring oversight.
Well, the oversight is actually mine, Representative, because there's a missing pin on there. We have the Appalachia Center, which is an Ohio-based center that actually helps cover a very small part of Northern Kentucky. But I agree with you that the
But it would cover Kenton, Boone, and Campbell, and the.
We also have a Cincinnati Women's Business Center that we partner with for that coverage.
Yeah, I was just testing you guys.
And they're wonderful. But for proximity's sake, why we went there is to jump on 75 and get to Covington. It's something I frequently do. I love being in Northern Kentucky because it's very vibrant with that. But we do have a lot of great partners up there that can be our boots on the ground as well.
Gotcha. But come to District 30 in Louisville next. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Kulkarni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for presenting and educating us today on the work that you do, and thank you for everything and all the services that you provide. I had a couple of questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman. In terms of data, going back to Representative King's point, there are a lot of immigrant women that start businesses because they have to. Right, there's a variety of factors. I appreciate that you allow men in there as well. My question, and I know you mentioned that you offer services or resources maybe in 36 different languages. My first question is, do you all do any kind of outreach to non-English speaking communities, or do they have to find you?
Well, absolutely, yes. Not necessarily focused on immigrant, and I can explain a little bit about the nuances and why. But in terms of other languages, especially in California, and you see that intense concentration of PINs in California, that's one example where the state of California and the network in California have partnered together to fill where they see some gaps. But there are specific organizations, Asian Chambers of Commerce, Asian Community Development Organizations that host Women's Business Center programs, and virtually all of the offerings, every bit of their outreach is in those languages. And so a lot of outreach is happening there. I would say also in California, some examples would be Spanish speaking. When it comes to some of the immigrant work, though, where one of the biggest barriers is not being able to get financing. If they don't have the documents necessary to secure SBA-backed lending, then there's just that the women's business centers are in a sense resource constrained on how they can support, how they can help. And with so many other demands on the women's business center, that doesn't tend to be a proactive outreach component, though they tend to receive it. So now what we're beginning to see is co-op as a method of business entity formation, especially among undocumented, because they can circumvent some of the entity registration requirements and then go out and find like revolving loan funds or things that aren't federally backed. It's not a cohesive strategy or something that's formalized across the network because the demand hasn't been uniform, but it's just a trend I'm starting to see.
And just a quick follow-up. So these funds are restricted to citizens, or can they be permanent residents?
There's no tracking requirement of a citizen to enroll for services.
Okay.
So anyone can actually submit a request for counseling by providing very limited information about themselves. Now then there's additional demographic and profile information that is an option to provide. And then the personal identifying information, PII data, is withheld on the information that's reporting to SBA. So the client-specific contact information is withheld at the center, and SBA just gets like performance data.
Got it. And I have several follow-up questions, but I will not take up more of
Okay.
the committee's time. I'll get with you all offline. Thank you.
Sound like you'll be hearing back from Representative Carcarney. But ladies, thank you very much for your presentation. Again, we met before and talked. I think it's great what you do. You know, again, we all small business owners, again, are good at doing stuff, but unfortunately, budgeting, projection, getting marketing, doing the paperwork to get a loan is not what we're normally good at, and we fill that gap. And we are just remember, we are the economic drivers in the state of Kentucky. 67% of all jobs created in the state of Kentucky are by small business, and appreciate what you do. Thank you, because again, in today's environment, it gets tougher and tougher. So looking forward to you having you back next year with even better success story.